Hey guys, my name is David Wilkes, and today I'm going to be talking to you about stadium subsidies. Government subsidized stadiums and arenas have provided a home for the majority of the teams throughout the four major sports leagues. From the NHL to the NFL, many teams have received a pretty penny from state, local, and federal government to construct these massive buildings. The interesting part about it is that many of the owners of the teams can afford to finance the projects themselves, but since their particular position allows for them to easily persuade political officials to finance them, many owners do not pay a dime. These teams' monopolistic nature allows for them to do many things that affect taxpayers and athletes. The concept of the seen and the unseen is an important thing to consider. When weighing the options, the officials who make the decisions sometimes only consider the accounting costs rather than the economic costs. Sports being so popular and having such passionate fans and supporters only attributes to the biased decisions by the officials. I plan to discuss why I believe the government should minimize or cut completely their contributions to stadium, arena,
on the public contribution. Billions of tax dollars have funded these stadiums and arenas throughout the late 20th and early 21st century. Although many projects aren't funded completely, most projects are dominated by public funding. Since 2000, 34 stadiums or arenas were built in the United States for professional sports teams. Of those 34 stadiums, 3 of them received no public funding, while 7 were paid in full by the public sector. And over 23 received half of the construction costs from the public. A special scenario regarding Consol Energy Center. The modern blending home for the Pittsburgh Penguins was funded by the Isle of Capri casinos, but the interesting fact about this scenario was that the $321 million was covered, but in exchange for a state gambling license and the approval for a $500 million casino to be built in the city. Though the Lemieux Group took an approach different than many others, and whether or not it was morally right, the taxpayers aren't footing the bill in this case. A lot of these teams receive the funding, usually use their unique monopolistic characteristics, and even often utilize powerful lobbyists and incentivize officials with season tickets and such. A particular situation I'd like to discuss involves a proposed football stadium in Los Angeles. It has been approved, and the owner of the St. Louis Rams, Stan Kroenke, agreed to finance it, but since the team is well aware of their monopolistic situation, a bidding war for their loyalty has arisen. The city of St. Louis has proposed a plan to keep their beloved football team, and it includes a $400 million contribution towards a waterfront stadium. On to the unseen. People see money going into stadiums, people spending their dollars at the stadiums, going to the games. Economist J.C. Bradbury commented during an interview with Reason TV's Nick Gillespie. He went on to say, really, this is just a transfer from locals. Instead of spending their money on movies or going out to eat, they're going to sports games. So it looks like it's generating a lot of money. The politicians have an easy sell to the public because sports are extremely popular, though what the public doesn't realize is that economically, building these massive projects aren't inducing permanent stability, but in fact are contributing to a negative economic impact. A lot of these subsidies end up contributing to a net loss down the road. They don't predict that, but they predict what they want to get the public on board to back these subsidies. Although Keynesian theory does support these attempts to stimulate economic growth, it is not permanent growth. The proposed football stadium in Los Angeles has been estimated to create over 10,000 jobs and to bring in tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue. But they're just temporary jobs, and it's just an estimation of revenue. There are many other things that could be done with the money that could improve the city's well-being and be beneficial to society while still creating steady jobs. Stuff like improving schools or improving road conditions are things that the government can do for the public, because after all, the government's purpose is to serve its citizens.
To conclude the presentation, I'd like to just reiterate a few things about what I've said. Um, in reality, the opportunity cost of a stadium is quite high and usually not considered when deciding to build. The city or state officials are blinded by the fact that they wanted professional sports teams to stay in or come to their city. Frederick Bastiat once weighed in on the unseen, saying, "There's only one difference between a bad economist and a good one. The bad economist confines himself to the visible effect. The good economist takes into account both the effect that can be seen and those effects that must be foreseen." In reality, the jobs and influx in economic activity are only temporary because sports seasons only take up a portion of the time. In reality, cities have a lot of publicly detrimental problems to assess other than these massive subsidies. The government's purpose, after all, is to serve its citizens, not to ensure and fuel civic pride.